Debt rarely begins with a crisis. It starts quietly. A small payment delayed, a purchase you meant to cover next month, a card used just this once. Nothing feels serious. You're still in control, still responsible, still managing. The numbers are small, the consequences invisible. Life continues as usual. You go to work, you pay the bills, you make plans, and debt sits somewhere in the background, barely noticeable, barely relevant. At first, it even feels useful, a tool, a buffer, a way to keep moving forward when timing isn't perfect. You tell yourself it's temporary, just until things stabilize, just until income increases, just until this month passes. And the logic makes sense, because nothing is collapsing. There's no alarm, no interruption, no moment that forces you to stop, just a quiet agreement with the future. I'll handle it later. And later feels safe. Later feels distant. Later feels manageable. So you continue. Not recklessly, not irresponsibly, just normally. And that's how it grows. Not through desperation, through routine, through everyday decisions that feel reasonable in the moment. Another expense, another month, another promise to yourself that you'll sort it out soon. And soon never feels urgent, because debt doesn't demand attention immediately. It waits, it adapts, it blends into life, until one day, it stops being something you manage and starts being something that quietly manages you. Debt becomes dangerous when it starts feeling normal, not heavy, not stressful, just present. A number you're aware of, but not emotionally connected to. It sits somewhere in the background, like a subscription you forgot to cancel. You know it's there, you just don't feel it every day. And the mind adapts quickly. What once felt uncomfortable becomes familiar. What once felt risky becomes routine. You check the balance less often. You avoid thinking about totals. You focus only on what needs to be paid now, not the whole picture, just the next step, because the next step always feels manageable. This payment, this month, this adjustment, and as long as each individual decision feels small, the overall situation never feels overwhelming. That's how perception shifts. Debt stops looking like a problem to solve and starts looking like a situation to maintain. You're not trying to eliminate it. You're trying to handle it. Keep it stable. Keep it under control. Keep it from getting worse. And that mindset changes behavior. You stop thinking long-term. You start thinking in cycles. Next paycheck. Next due date. Next adjustment. Life becomes structured around maintenance, not growth, not expansion, maintenance. And maintenance consumes attention, because there's always something to calculate, something to postpone, something to rebalance. You become careful, not strategic. Careful with spending, careful with decisions, careful with risk, and careful feels responsible. It feels mature. It feels like you're doing the right thing. But over time, carefulness replaces movement. You hesitate more, delay more, avoid bigger decisions, not because you lack ambition, because you're protecting stability. And stability, when built on debt, is fragile. It requires constant attention, constant monitoring, constant adjustment. And that pressure changes how you see opportunities. A new path feels dangerous. A new plan feels unrealistic. A new risk feels irresponsible. Because now, you're not just deciding for the future. You're protecting the present. Protecting the system you've built to keep everything from collapsing. And slowly, debt shifts from being financial to psychological. It lives in decisions, in hesitation, in the way you evaluate every possibility, not by asking, Is this good for my life? But, can I afford the risk? And when that question becomes the default, the world gets smaller. Options narrow, moves slow down, ambition gets filtered, not by ability, by obligation. Because obligation always feels heavier than potential, and over time, the safest choice becomes the most attractive one. Stay where you are. Keep things predictable. Avoid anything that might shake the balance, even if that balance is built on something temporary, even if it's slowly draining your energy, because the mind prefers a stable weight over an uncertain lift. At first, debt feels practical. Later, it starts feeling personal, not because of the numbers, because of what those numbers represent. Promises delayed, plans postponed, choices limited, and slowly, emotion enters the equation. You don't talk about it openly, not because it's catastrophic, because it's embarrassing, not dramatic enough to justify panic, not small enough to ignore. It exists in that uncomfortable middle space. You avoid certain conversations. You hesitate when money comes up. You mentally calculate during moments that used to feel simple. Dinner invitations, weekend trips, unexpected expenses. Every situation becomes a quiet assessment. Can I manage this? Will this make things worse? Can I recover from it next month? And that constant calculation changes how you experience life. Moments stop being moments. They become decisions. Small internal negotiations, not visible to anyone else, but constant. You might smile, participate, stay involved, but part of your mind is elsewhere, running numbers, replaying purchases, forecasting next month. And this mental noise doesn't feel dramatic. It feels responsible, like you're being careful, like you're being adult. But responsibility without progress feels heavy, because effort is being spent just to maintain position, not to improve it. And that creates frustration, not explosive frustration, subtle frustration, the kind that shows up as irritability, as withdrawal, as hesitation. You become more defensive, more sensitive to financial topics, more reactive when plans involve spending, not because you don't want to live, because you feel exposed. Debt exposes vulnerability. It reminds you that your margin is thin, that a single mistake could tip the balance, and that awareness changes how you carry yourself. Confidence shifts, not dramatically, but slightly. You second-guess bigger goals. You delay long-term commitments. You convince yourself that now isn't the right time, because the idea of adding pressure feels unbearable. And pressure doesn't always look like stress. Sometimes it looks like avoidance. You avoid opening certain emails, avoid checking full balances, avoid calculating totals. You focus only on what needs immediate action, not the full reality, because full reality feels overwhelming, and the brain protects itself. It reduces the picture, shrinks the scale, turns a large problem into manageable fragments. This payment, this week, this adjustment. But fragmentation hides accumulation, and accumulation changes behavior. You might work more, push harder, take extra shifts, not to build something bigger, just to stay afloat. And staying afloat becomes the goal, not growth, not expansion, just stability. And stability, when it requires constant effort, starts to feel like survival, not living. And that emotional weight, carried quietly, reshapes identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone building a future. You start seeing yourself as someone handling consequences, managing outcomes, repairing past decisions, maintaining balance. And that shift, even if subtle, changes the way you see your potential. Because when your focus is on damage control, Ambition feels irresponsible. Risk feels reckless. Dreams feel unrealistic. And so you scale yourself down, not because you lack ability, because you feel constrained, because obligation has become the loudest voice in the room. Debt rarely grows through one large decision. It expands through upgrades, small improvements that feel justified, a better phone, a slightly nicer apartment, a car that feels more reliable, clothes that match the life you're trying to build. Nothing extreme, just steps forward, each one reasonable, each one explainable. You're not being reckless. You're keeping up with expectations, with your environment, with the version of yourself you believe you should be. And debt makes that possible. It fills the gap between reality and aspiration, just enough to keep things moving, just enough to avoid feeling left behind. And at first, it works. Life looks stable. Nothing collapses. Nothing feels out of control. Payments are made. Balances are maintained. Adjustments happen. The system holds. But holding requires effort. And effort requires compromise. You postpone savings. Delay long-term plans. Avoid risks that could improve your situation. Because every decision now has weight. Every move has consequences. And consequences feel expensive. So you choose safety, not growth. Safety becomes the strategy. Minimum payments become routine. You don't aim to eliminate the debt. You aim to manage it. Keep it from growing. Keep it from hurting. Keep it from becoming visible. And visibility is the real fear. Because visibility forces confrontation. It forces you to look at totals, at timelines, at the reality of how long this might last. So you stay focused on fragments. This month, this payment, this adjustment, and months turn into cycles. Cycles turn into years. And slowly, the idea of being debt-free starts feeling unrealistic. Not impossible, just distant. Like something that belongs to another version of your life. A future version. A more stable version. A more disciplined version. And that's where the illusion takes hold. Future me will fix this. Future me will earn more. Future me will be smarter. Future me will be more careful. So present me keeps moving. Keeps adjusting, keeps negotiating, keeps postponing, because the pressure isn't immediate, and what isn't immediate rarely feels urgent, until something changes, an unexpected cost, a shift in income, a moment where the balance stops holding, and suddenly, the system feels fragile, not broken, fragile. One more expense could tilt it, one mistake could expose it. One interruption could unravel everything. And that fragility changes the way you live. You become reactive, not proactive. You respond to problems. Instead of building solutions, you repair. Instead of creating. And slowly, the future stops looking like something you shape. It starts looking like something you try to survive. Debt doesn't need to collapse your life to control it. It just needs to limit your options, limit your timing, limit your freedom, limit your ability to move without calculation. And limitation reshapes identity. You stop asking, what do I want to build? You start asking, what can I afford to risk? And when that question becomes central, ambition adjusts. Dreams shrink. Plans become practical. Goals become safer. Decisions become smaller. Not because you stopped caring, because you're adapting. Because adaptation feels responsible. Because responsibility, in this context, means protecting stability. Even if that stability is temporary. Even if it's built on something fragile. Even if it's slowly draining momentum from your life. Because momentum requires freedom, and freedom is the first thing debt quietly takes away. Debt changes how you move through life, not in obvious ways. You still work, still function, still look like everything is under control, but decisions feel heavier, not emotionally, practically. Every risk carries weight. Every mistake has a price. Every unexpected turn feels dangerous. So you start adjusting. Smaller choices, safer paths, more predictable outcomes. You tell yourself it's temporary, that once things stabilize, you'll finally have space to think bigger. But stability keeps moving. There's always another payment, another adjustment, another month to get through, and life slowly reorganizes itself around that rhythm. Not growth, not progress, maintenance, handling, balancing, staying afloat. You stop thinking in years. You think in due dates, in next paychecks, in what needs to be covered first. And without noticing, your world starts narrowing. Not dramatically, quietly. You hesitate before opportunities. Delay decisions that used to feel exciting. Turn down risks you once would have taken. Not because you became less capable, because margin disappeared. And margin is what makes movement possible. Without it, every step feels calculated. Every decision feels loaded. Every change feels threatening. So you stay where things are manageable, where nothing breaks, where nothing spirals, where everything can be handled. Even if it means staying in situations you've outgrown, even if it means postponing parts of your life that once felt important. Because survival comes first, balance comes first, control comes first, and control feels responsible. It feels mature. It feels like you're doing what adults are supposed to do, until you realize something uncomfortable. You're no longer building your life. You're managing it, maintaining it, protecting it, keeping it from slipping, but not expanding it, not testing it, not pushing it forward. And years pass like that, not chaotic, not dramatic, just controlled, careful, contained. And containment becomes normal. You get used to smaller plans, safer decisions, lower expectations. Not because you stopped wanting more, because wanting more feels risky, and risk feels expensive. Debt doesn't need to ruin everything to matter. It just needs to sit there, quietly shaping what feels possible. And over time, what feels possible becomes what you accept. Not because it's enough, because it's manageable. And manageable feels safer than uncertain. Even when uncertainty is where change lives. Even when change is what you needed most. Nothing collapses. Nothing explodes. Life just keeps moving forward, in a direction you didn't fully choose, but learned to accept.